Hello, Christian Ethics class. This is Professor Opterbeck. Welcome to the review and summary video for this week. So once again, I want to thank most of you for really great conversation on the very, very difficult scenarios and questions that we were dealing with last week. I know there was a lot of material. I hope that some of the material I gave you, you can kind of hang on to for your own resource as you continue, I'm sure, over the course of your lives and ministries addressing this question. I said most of you did a great job with that discussion, and I do want to point out, and I did push back in the forums on a few of you, that in this kind of discussion, I think in general in sort of your life and your ministry and your work, and particularly in a seminary class, proof texting is not enough. I don't want to see you just kind of throw out some verses that you think apply to the circumstance, even if perhaps they do apply to the circumstance. But what we need to do in a seminary class, and in particular what we need to do when we're addressing really difficult and controversial social issues, is to provide good argument, good reasons. Go back to the beginning of the semester when we talked about the sources of authority for thinking theologically and thinking about theological ethics. Absolutely, Scripture is central, but it's Scripture considered holistically, it's Scripture considered with good principles of exegesis, it's Scripture recognizing kind of the hermeneutical gap between the original context and ours. Not to say that necessarily throws over settled or traditional interpretations or interpretations that you might already hold. It may or it may not, but it requires you to really dig in. Tradition, of course, looking at the whole tradition and also exegeting the tradition and understanding where the tradition comes from and whether the tradition makes sense for today and in what way it makes sense. And then experience. We can't discount experience. We can't simply brush off experience. Again, this doesn't mean that a particular experience somehow trumps Scripture, but it does mean that our experience has to bring to light our reflection. There's always kind of a cycle or a circle of going through these different sources prayerfully and carefully and trying to think them through. And that's what I want to see you do in this class. And that's why for some of you I kind of gave some strong pushback, because that's what I want to see happen. I also want to say that you need to keep in mind that in a few weeks your final credo paper is going to be due, as well as your second primary source summary. So I think most of you did a very good job on the primary source summaries. I'm not worried about that. The credo papers, if you haven't picked your topic yet, you need to do that really soon. You need to be thinking through this. It is a research paper. It has to be properly documented, properly researched, properly supported. If you have questions about that, if you have ideas for a topic that you want to run by me, please get in touch and I'll be happy to do that. So looking forward to this week, we continue to dive into some of these really difficult and controversial and complex questions in our culture. As I've set this up, we could sort of call it birth, death, and dying. I like to think of it as theology, biology, and technology, right? How do the things we're able to do technologically at the beginning of human life, at the end of human life, relate to our thinking about theological ethics? And as you can see, these questions about abortion, assisted reproduction, contraception, eugenics, genetic engineering, euthanasia, assisted suicide, these are all really complicated and difficult issues. I've given you a lot of video material for this week. I sort of give you my normal lectures and then a couple of longer external pieces of content. Please do watch through these. I think that they're really helpful and really useful, because in these areas, in all areas, but in these in particular, understanding the science is really helpful to how we think through our theological discussions. We cannot afford to do theology and do ethics in our contemporary times without referring to the best scientific understanding that we have. And I actually think in this particular area, it's very important to do so. So we'll do that this week. Notice that the discussion forum is very different. I tried to just kind of jog things up a little bit. There were a lot of different ways I wanted to break out different kinds of questions. So it's framed as a group project. It's not really a group project. I'm looking at each contribution individually. You don't need to work together. I want each of you to make a contribution, but the idea is that you each have just one of these subtopics to address in the first instance, and then to respond to somebody else. So hopefully this will all work out, and it'll end up, of course you're free to respond to anybody's post that you want to, but hopefully it'll work out and we'll end up having a good and robust discussion. And then looking forward to next week, we will be continuing the discussion of birth and death, and in particular we're going to look at it in the context of the big legal disputes in the United States. There's some additional material that I'm going to post, I hope by the end of the week, which will just be some summaries of case law. I just taught constitutional law at my law school this semester. I'm just finishing that up, so really had a chance to dig into some of these cases like Roe v. Wade and so on. So I'll give you some summaries to that, and next week we will talk about that, and then after that we have our final week on creation care. So dig into it this week. Keep working hard. Also take a little time and have a great Thanksgiving and enjoy Thanksgiving, and I will see you around on the discussion boards.